Hey guys, so after 2 Corinthians 9, when Paul tells the church in Corinth about the collection for the Christians in Jerusalem, saying thanks be to God for his inexpressible gift, he says in chapter 10, I, Paul, myself entreat you, by the meekness and gentleness of Christ. I, who am humble when face to face with you, but bold towards you when I'm away, probably quoting an accusation against him. I beg of you that when I am present, I may not have to show boldness with such confidence as I count on showing against some who suspect us of walking according to the flesh. So there were accusations that Paul was not being consistent in his living, that he was walking according to the flesh. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. There's a spiritual reality built into it. We don't have to be under the dominion of sin anymore. We are able to fight against sin and its power. Sin no longer reigns in us. Christ set us free so that we can be free. And he says we destroy, and it doesn't even say spiritual principalities, evil heavenly realm, demons, like it says in Ephesians 6. Here, he actually connects the divine power to destroy strongholds with destroying arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ, being ready to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. And so here, this is a very important point, because very often the strongholds, this spiritual warfare that we fight, is a battle of thoughts. It's a battle of things that are keeping us away from the knowledge of God. And so we destroy the arguments, every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, all of the arguments that are fallacious, all of the arguments that ultimately fall apart when you get to their logical conclusions, when you look at the historical evidence for the resurrection, the philosophical need for God, like all of these things come together for the cumulative case for Christ. That would be an example of destroying the arguments and lofty opinions. Like, oh, God is evil. And it's like, okay, but what about the evil in the world? And it's like, oh, God allows evil. And it's like, okay, you can't have it both ways. Like, do you want God to judge evil, or do you want him to be patient with evil? You know, like, you can't be mad that he's sometimes both, depending on the situation, you know? Like, he wipes out evil, and there is an eternal judgment at the end. But there's patience now in that as we wait for his return, we count it our salvation, like Peter says in 2 Peter. So these are the types of things where we destroy the arguments, lofty opinions that are ultimately rooted in our sinful, selfish desires, suppressing the truth in unrighteousness, or even just not thinking it through, you know? Like I was at that point, at one point in my life. But the reality is that the arguments are quite easily destroyed if we're willing to submit ourselves to the truth rather than our presuppositions and towards what we feel is best for us, you know, because it's not about conforming ourselves to the image of what we want to be. It's about conforming ourselves to Christ and about seeking the truth, no matter how difficult it is for us. And so we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. And so there, you know, we very often think about that in terms of sin being like, oh, I have to take this thought captive because I'm thinking about bad stuff, right? But here in the context, it's actually more, it can be applied to that, but it's more specifically about taking captive the thoughts that are against God, the thoughts where we should know better, but we're holding on to something that is against God, against the knowledge of God, holding an opinion where we're like, okay, but that's not consistent with Scripture, or that's not actually true to the character of God. And so we need to change our view, take those thoughts captive, and destroy the opinions that are not consistent with the truth that we do know. And so look at what is before your eyes. If anyone is confident that he is Christ's, let him remind himself that just as he is Christ's, so also are we. For even if I boast a little too much of our authority, which the Lord gave for building you up, and not for destroying you, I will not be ashamed. I do not want to appear to be frightening you with my letters. For they say his letters are weighty and strong, but his bodily presence is weak, and his speech of no account. So let such a person understand that what we say by letter when absent, we do when present. Not that we dare to classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves, but when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they're without understanding. Now, obviously, the quick and easy application is comparing ourselves to others is a quick way to feel entitled. It's a very quick and easy way to feel bad about ourselves and to be discontent with what God's given us. But here specifically, he's talking about commending ourselves, measuring themselves by one another in terms of what they've accomplished for God, their spiritual gifts, that type of thing. Comparing himself with the so-called super apostles, the false apostles that he'll get into in the next chapter. And the point is they don't measure themselves by one another. They don't compare themselves against others, because it's not about how are we doing compared to other people. It's not even about how are we doing compared to ourselves yesterday. Like, it's good to recognize progress and to always be pursuing Christ in an upward trend, right? Being transformed from one degree of glory to another in the sanctification process. But the whole point is we're not supposed to just be looking at ourselves. Our primary focus is looking towards Christ, the author and perfecter of our faith. Like, we look to him as our example. And so we're without understanding if our focus is other people before Christ. But we will not boast beyond limits, but will boast only with regard to the area of influence God assigned to us, to reach even to you. For we are not overextending ourselves as though we did not reach you, for we were the first to come all the way to you with the gospel of Christ. And we do not boast beyond limit in the labors of others. And so he's saying, I don't want to put my name, stamp my name on a ministry that's not my own. I don't want to take credit for things that are my own. And even the things that he does acknowledge are his own, he acknowledges in 1 Corinthians that the one who waters, the one who plants, they're nothing. They're the same. Like, it's ultimately God who gives the growth. And so even there he says, hey, like, I have authority as an apostle over you. I have been given this commission, this responsibility by Jesus Christ, but I'm not going to boast beyond the limit in the labors of others. But our hope is that as your faith increases, our area of influence among you may be greatly enlarged, so that we may preach the gospel in lands beyond you, without boasting of work already done in another's area of influence. He doesn't want to keep treading the same spots over and over again. He wants to move on and do what he was supposed to do. Bring out the gospel to Judea, Jerusalem, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. He knew that his responsibility was planting these churches, setting up leaders like Titus and Timothy, and having them be overseers, elders, and people who are pastoring over these churches. Like, his responsibility wasn't to stay in one place and to claim one church as his own. His responsibility was to plant these churches and move out. Like, he knew what his responsibility before God was, and he didn't want to take ownership or claim or boast in the work of what would ultimately be another overseer, another pastor, another elder later on. Like, he wanted them to have some level of freedom in their growth, in their responsibility, and even trusting other leaders with that. Like, he was saying, let the one who boasts boast in the Lord, because ultimately, regardless of who is doing it, it's the work of the Lord. For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends. Now, first, let me just say, this example of, hey, we're to go out, we're to plant the churches, leave a pastor there, and then if it's my responsibility to plant churches, I don't keep staying stuck there, right? Like, I trust the leader there on some degree, right? This is why satellite churches are a problem, because you're not actually under the pastor that is preaching, which is problematic. But let's end with this very last thing. It's not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends. We can have all sorts of awards, we can have all sorts of podcasts, all sorts of big events, all sorts of things where we commend ourselves, look at the number of followers we have, look how great the church is greatly increased. And yet ultimately it's God who gives the growth. We can thank God for that, but it is ultimately, are we seeking to be good and righteous before God? That's always our aim. to love the Lord our God and to love his people.